It's a phrase that's thrown around a lot these days. You couldn't make Blazing Saddles today. You can't make Ferris Bueller's Day Off today. You can't make Mallrats today. The world we inhabit has evolved so much that it makes it impossible to imagine the very premise of some movies being greenlit today. This week, I'd like to add another title to that fabled list. Hi, I'm Noah Zahradnik, and in this episode of Real Talk, we're going to examine how you could never get away with making Die Hard with a Vengeance in 2020.
Hey, listen, we had a report of a guy coming through here with 8 reindeer. Yeah, they said he was a jolly old fat guy with a snowy white beard. Cute little red and white suit. I'm surprised you didn't see him.
And now, our feature presentation.
All right, fair warning, y'all. While it won't be in-depth, we will be discussing domestic terrorism, child endangerment, and race relations this week. It's pretty heavy on its own, so don't be afraid to back out if you need to. All good? Cool, let's continue. To me, it truly isn't the holiday season until John McClane drops Hans Gruber from the 32nd floor of the Nakatomi Plaza. 1988's Die Hard has been one of my favorite Christmas movies since I first saw it back in high school. Yearly screenings of both it and its sequel, Die Hard 2, Die Harder, have become a family tradition. But the Die Hard franchise obviously doesn't end there. With 5 movies currently in its lineage, the 3 remaining sequels are often overshadowed by the holiday hype plastered on the first 2. I am admittedly guilty of this as well. So, prior to this year's viewing, I decided to re-examine the 3 remaining Die Hard films and see how they stack up against their predecessors. It wasn't long before I made a startling discovery. John McClane's third outing, 1995's Die Hard with a Vengeance, could never be made today. Like, ever. There is so much contemporary cinematic taboo in this film, it is genuinely jarring to watch today. Now, please don't confuse that with triggering. When I say cinematic taboo, I mean literally, aspects of the content in this movie are taboo in today's day and age. You do not see it in movies for one reason or another, and that's the stuff we're looking at today. If anybody is unfamiliar or needs a refresher, real quick, Bruce Willis is John McClane, an experienced New York cop. After a downtown department store is blown up, the terrorist responsible for the attack calls into McClane's precinct.
Who is this?
Call me Simon.
What do you want?
I want to play a game.
What kind of game?
Simon Says. Simon's going to tell Lieutenant McClane what to do, and Lieutenant McClane is going to do it. Non-compliance will result in a penalty.
What penalty?
Another big bang in a very public place.
After interfering with McClane by accident, Simon's games soon involve Zeus, a New Yorker played by Samuel L. Jackson.
As in father of Apollo, Mount Olympus, don't fuck with me or I'll shove a lightning bolt up your ass. Zeus, you got a problem with that?
Simon sends these guys all over the city to defuse different explosives before revealing his final game.
I have put 2,400 pounds of explosive in one of the 1,446 schools in Greater New York. It is fitted with a timer set to explode at exactly 3 p.m. unless John McClane and his new best friend complete the tasks I set them. If you're really clever, you'll learn the location of the bomb and the code to disarm it.
Since it's a Die Hard movie, there's way more to it than what's going on the surface, but that's the basic gist of the film. This small snippet already highlights multiple no-nos in post-9/11 American cinema, and we'll get to that in time. First off, let's take a look at the tech. Die Hard 3 features more modern electronic advancements than the previous 2 films. Aside from tried-and-true tech like CCTV security systems, air traffic control consoles, and the occasional electronic vault door, Die Hard and Die Harder are pretty standard shootout flicks.
Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker.
Die Hard 3, however, makes things a bit more modern. Front and center are remote-controlled and computer-detonated bombs, call trace scramblers, anti-lock brakes, and this brand new device called a cellular telephone.
Shit, what? Shut the phone. Oh, it's bad.
Worse yet, a big part of Simon's plot has McClane and Zeus racing to answer payphones around the city. Payphones? Does New York even still have payphones? I don't know. I genuinely don't know. Our technological advancements entomb Simon's nefariousness firmly in the 90s, his plot would require some serious updating in order to work today. But technology is a gimme, all right? Countless movies are now dated to a certain time period because of their cutting-edge technology. We need to dig deeper. We need to talk about Die Hard 3 and its race relations for two main reasons. Number one, the slurs. The movie features scenes between African American characters where the N-word is used. I cannot recall any explicit moment of a white character using a racial slur in the film, but one of Simon's games forces John to wander the streets of Harlem wearing a sign that expresses a specific distaste for an entire race.
Not to get too personal, but a white man standing in the middle of Harlem wearing a sign that says, "I hate niggers," has either got some serious personal issues or not all his dogs are barking.
I don't believe a film that is written, directed, produced, and headlined all by white people would be allowed to use so many racial slurs today without some form of backlash. And a perfect example of this is Quentin Tarantino. Many of Tarantino's films, like Jackie Brown, Django Unchained, and Pulp Fiction, have received criticism for their use of slurs because Tarantino is a white guy.
I'm gonna ask you a question. When you came pulling in here, did you notice a sign on the front of my house that said Dead Nigger Storage?
Jimmy, you know I ain't seen no shit.
Did you notice a sign in the front of my house that said Dead Nigger Storage?
Many of these critiques question whether or not it's acceptable for him to write characters for the screen, whether they be black or white, that use the N-word because of his ethnicity. Now, I'm not saying he's right or he's wrong for doing so. I'm just stating that it's an ethical question that's been thrown around for over 25 years now. Much like Tarantino's films, I believe that the use of slurs in Die Hard 3 would not go unchecked today. Now, number two, we've got to talk about Los Angeles. The film hit theaters in May of 1995, just a hair over 3 years after the Rodney King riots in LA. The memory of King's abuse by LAPD officers is still fresh in people's minds. The film even makes explicit reference to the event.
So what's up with this LA thing? You famous or something?
Yeah, for about 5 minutes.
Don't tell me, Rodney King, right?
Fuck you.
Compared to other biracial-led films from the time, it's especially difficult to push the image of Rodney King out of your head, given McClane's career. The relationship between Zeus and John is tense. It's clear through the film that John has some serious implicit biases, and Zeus is not afraid to call him out on it.
You got any idea what those guys are doing to my shop right now?
Chill out, Jesus.
Chill out? What the fuck? Are you trying to relate to me? Talk like a white man.
Okay, Zeus, I'm sorry you got
Why you keep calling me Jesus? I look Puerto Rican to you.
You can't start over. You can't start over. Put my foot up your head, you dumb mother. Say it.
You were gonna call me a nigga, weren't you?
No, I wasn't.
Yes, you were. What were you gonna call me?
Asshole! There, take this.
How's it work?
You know how to shoot a gun?
Look, all brothers don't know how to shoot guns, you racist motherfucker.
Sue me.
In fact, Zeus isn't treated very fairly by anyone in the NYPD. There's a particularly rough scene where Zeus has to jump a turnstile to get into the subway. As a result, he's pursued by a police officer and held at gunpoint as Simon calls a nearby payphone.
I have to answer that phone.
Get him off!
Look, if you have to shoot me, then you go ahead and you shoot me. But I have to answer this phone, all right?
In another scene, when Zeus gets smart on the phone with Simon, he's reprimanded by the police lieutenant.
You interfered with a well-laid plan.
Yeah, well, you can stick your well-laid plan up your well-laid ass.
That was not smart. There are lives at stake here. You better hope he calls back.
But when McClane does the same thing, nobody says a word.
Do you understand me, John?
Oh, yes, I understand. I understand that you're a fucking wacko that likes to play kids' games. That's what I understand.
Hardly.
Hardly? Well, then who are you? Somebody I sent up?
John, come.
Huh? Why don't you come on down here to Police Plaza and we'll figure this out like a couple of men, huh? Just come on down here.
At one point, John even ridicules Zeus for calling out his microaggressions.
You know how to pick this lock?
Is this some black shit again?
Hey, will you stop with that racial shit? Are you a fucking locksmith or not?
Yeah.
It's a strained relationship, for sure, but nothing ever comes to fruition. At some point, the racial undertones are just dropped, and Zeus is all buddy-buddy with McClane for the rest of the movie. Now, Zeus, admittedly, is a headstrong character who is unwilling to let others demean him based on his skin color. But just having Zeus call out McClane, or even the entire NYPD's implicit biases, doesn't automatically solve the systematic racism that has been oppressing African Americans for decades. It feels like the film is trying to say something about race and the relationship between oppression and authority, but it just doesn't work. The film would likely be eaten alive by critics today for failing to follow through on this message. You can't start something this big without finishing it. You have to commit. And as if that wasn't heavy enough, we haven't even talked about 9/11 yet.
9/11.
Terrorism in modern Hollywood cinema is most commonly depicted in two different ways. Number one, the film features American characters but does not take place on U.S. soil. A great example would be Skyscraper, a 2018 film that, coincidentally, got a lot of slack for being just a Die Hard ripoff. Long story short, terrorists gain control over a newly constructed skyscraper, and it's up to Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson to take them all out. The key here is that the building is in Hong Kong, so American audiences are drawn in by the American movie star, but not personally affected by the film, because it's not their country. Alternatively, number two, if the terrorists attack on U.S. soil, the movie will most likely feature an underlying theme of nationalism and an admiration for the resilience of the United States. The easiest way for films to do this is by roping in the government or armed forces somehow into the plot. An example would be 2013's White House Down, where the attacking forces just obliterate the Capitol building and blow up a pretty good chunk of the White House before taking the president hostage. Even then, almost all explosions and special effects in movies today are CGI, so it may be shocking to see explosions popping off in the Capitol building, but it still doesn't quite look real. The veil of fictionality that separates the viewer from the movie must be preserved. All of this means absolutely nothing prior to September 11th of 2001. Die Hard 3 may have shot in numerous cities up and down the East Coast, but one thing is true. During production, in 1994, they used practical effects to create an explosion in a downtown metropolitan setting, and they labeled it as New York City. You, and I cannot stress this enough, do not do that in post 9/11 Hollywood cinema. Not only is it a terrorist attack within our borders, it's a terrorist attack in New York City. And it's real. It's practical effects. If a film were to do this today, it would immediately garner comparisons to 9/11, either consciously or unconsciously in the minds of viewers. And it would terrify studio executives. I can only imagine they'd want to bolster this up with themes of nationalism in hopes of ensuring that the audience has an enjoyable experience. You know, the U.S. is tough, we'll make it through this like we always do, and whatnot. And it gets worse. Remember Simon's final challenge?
Repeat, one school will be dismissed at 3 p.m. permanently.
The police find the bomb with like a half hour left, right?
I'd say you could call off your search.
Can you stop it?
I shouldn't even touch it. Who knows what kind of booby traps this thing's got.
Not only does the film have the NYPD waiting as long as possible to evacuate the students, it has the balls.
The impudence! The audacity! The unmitigated gall!
To trap kids in the building after the evacuation. They are left cowering in the corner, bracing for the explosion when it's revealed that the bomb isn't real. It's a dummy. It's a decoy. In a world where school children have to rehearse evacuation drills, not just for fires or tornadoes, but for active shooters and legitimate bomb threats, you would never get away with putting such content in a movie, no less a blockbuster today. Not a chance. All of this isn't to say that Die Hard 3 is bad. No, sir. It is really, really good. Not quite as good as the first one, but it gives Die Harder a legitimate run for its money. I will say this, it's an incredibly tense thriller, and that is due in no small part to how subversive it has become with its age. Being born in 1998, I've grown up with a media landscape seeped in the residual memory of Rodney King and the 9/11 attacks. I was on the edge of my seat for most of the movie because of how intense it felt, how against the grain it was. I cannot tell you the last time that I was so shell-shocked by an antagonist's plan in an action blockbuster. And it's a crying shame because I know I'm going to have to wait a long time before it happens again, if it ever does. I guess you could say they just don't make them like they used to. Thank you for listening to this week's Real Talk. If you enjoyed this episode, please consider subscribing wherever it is that you listen to podcasts. Next week, I'm going to take a look at the money pit and how it uses slapstick comedy to teach us that successful relationships require a solid foundation. I am really looking forward to it, and I hope you are too.